The co-founder of Murder Incorporated, Albert Anastasia was one of New York City's most feared gangsters, until his story came to an end in shocking fashion. Albert Anastasia went from a poor fatherless boy in Italy to New York's most feared gangster, a man so bloodthirsty that he was called the Lord High Executioner. Not only did Albert Anastasia help found the modern American Mafia, he also co-founded and later took charge of Murder Incorporated, the enforcement arm of the National Crime Syndicate. In short, Albert Anastasia was a killer, and a cold-blooded one at that. He was known for his ruthlessness above all else, and his name was equal parts feared and respected. Unfortunately, the danger he presented also led to his downfall and eventual murder in a barber shop at the Park Sheraton Hotel in Midtown Manhattan. His death became the focal point of a high-profile police investigation. But while Vito Genovese and Carlo Gambino purportedly ordered the attack, police never caught Anastasia's killers. Albert Anastasia was born in Calabria, Italy in 1902. His father, a railroad worker, died shortly before World War I, leaving Albert's mother to look after 12 young children. It was a bleak period, and the family struggled to make ends meet. Eventually, it became clear that the older children would need to strike out in search of work elsewhere. So at the age of 15, Anastasia took a job on an Italian freighter, alongside some of his brothers. When their ship docked at the Brooklyn waterfront, the Anastasio boys slipped quietly away, leaving Italy behind for a new land, a land of opportunity. Anastasia's first run-in with the law came in the spring of 1921, when he became embroiled in a quarrel with fellow dockworker George Tirino. The disagreement turned violent, and Anastasia ended up killing Tirino. For the murder, the young Anastasia was arrested and sentenced to death. It was around this time, cooling his heels in Sing Sing Correctional Facility, that he changed his name to Albert Anastasia, to spare the shame of having a criminal in the family, his brother would later tell the New York Times. And there, from his lowest point, the newly christened Albert Anastasia began to rise. Accounts of what happened next differ. Some say Albert Anastasia's cool demeanor and aptitude for violence attracted the attention of Jimmy DiStefano, the death house barber of Sing Sing. DiStefano sent word to up-and-coming mob boss Lucky Luciano. Luciano seems to have taken an interest, though it's unclear whether Luck or Luciano himself did the most to save Albert Anastasia from an early grave. 1 year into Anastasia's prison stay, his lawyer managed to get him a retrial. By the time Anastasia showed up in court again, some of the prosecution's witnesses had mysteriously disappeared. He won the case on a legal technicality. Albert Anastasia was free again. Though he'd narrowly escaped death, Albert Anastasia had developed a taste for living outside the law. He quickly became a prominent leader in the International Longshoremen's Association, a hub for racketeering and murder. He went to prison again in 1923 for illegal possession of a firearm. And when he emerged 2 years later, it was to make his debut in Brooklyn's Mafia under the aegis of Joe Masseria. But his loyalty, it soon became clear, was to Lucky Luciano, who was planning to overthrow the old order and start a more inclusive criminal enterprise, one that could partner with the Jewish and Irish syndicates for larger-scale operations. Anastasia presented himself to Luciano as Muscle, an assassin who could ensure his rise to the top. He proved his worth in 1931 when Luciano lured Masseria to a restaurant. Anastasia, accompanied by several associates, entered the restaurant and gunned down the famous mob leader, ending his reign and making room for a new generation of mafiosos. And Anastasia was determined to play an important role in the New World Order. In the bloody decade that followed, Anastasia rose through the ranks of the Mafia by making his name synonymous with murder. In 1932 and 1933, he was indicted twice on murder charges. But each time, he escaped conviction when witnesses melted away, unwilling to testify. As a reward for Anastasia's services, Luciano, now the most powerful man in the American Mafia, tapped him to help lead up Murder Incorporated, the enforcement wing of the National Crime Syndicate. With Luciano's support, Anastasia also became underboss of the Mangano crime family, which would, in time, become the notorious Gambino clan. As others fell around him, Luciano was arrested, the members of Murder Incorporated were prosecuted, and a number of prominent mobsters fled to Italy. Anastasia remained. Meanwhile, the men who could rat on him died in mysterious accidents. In time, Vincent Mangano and his brother were murdered. Though many eyes turned to Anastasia, he was never convicted. Instead, he assumed Mangano's role as boss. Albert Anastasia had reached heights nearly unimaginable for a poor railman's son. By the late 1940s, he lorded over an enormous estate in Fort Lee, New Jersey. The stucco and tile mansion boasted sprawling views of New York, while maintaining some distance, a peaceful urban oasis. Like the man, the mansion had a hidden dark side, false walls, rumored tunnels, and ominous basement rooms, with drains in the floor for slaughtering deer. Albert Anastasia's good fortune came to an abrupt end in 1952, when he was targeted by the government for denaturalization, for lying in his naturalization application, as well for other crimes and misdemeanors. Like fellow gangster Al Capone, he was even charged with tax evasion. While he was battling it out in court, the Genovese crime family began to plot against him, cozying up to Anastasia's boss, Carlo Gambino. The tide was finally turning against him. But Anastasia, caught up in his own troubles and confident in his control, missed the warning signs. On October 25, 1957, Albert Anastasia was chauffeured from his cliffside home into the city to visit his barber at the Park Sheraton Hotel in Manhattan. His bodyguard left to run a quick errand, leaving the mobster momentarily unprotected. As Anastasia sat facing the mirror, two masked assassins stormed into the shop and fired 10 shots at the stunned mob boss. Confused and disoriented, he attempted to rush his killers but ended up charging at their reflections instead. Anastasia fell to the floor in a heap, dead. His assailants disappeared into the city. They were never identified, and while many have pointed the finger at Vito Genovese and Carlo Gambino, to this day it's unclear who ordered and carried out the mob hit. The image of Anastasia's lifeless body, covered in towels on the barbershop floor, stunned the public. The brutal murder became iconic in mob history, a shorthand for the violent interfamily wars of the 1950s. Anastasia's death marked the end of a nearly 30-year reign that made him one of the deadliest criminals in U.S. history. Today, his legacy lives on in the Gambino crime family, who rose to prominence as one of the most powerful crime syndicates in the country.